Welcome back, everybody, to Too Much Popcorn, the movie review podcast where Jimmy and I, we watch a movie, and then we sit down and we talk about it. We talk about the highs, the lows, the things we liked about it, and the things we didn't like about it. And then ultimately, we try and come up with a conclusion to answer the question of, would we recommend this movie to people, yes or no? And this week, we watched the hit 2010 film, The Man from Nowhere. That's right, he is a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land.
Where he from?
I don't know, but he's making all his plans for nobody. And this movie had Ben Wan, Kim Se-ron, and Tim Tae-hon, I think.
I wasn't even going to attempt any of those. I looked at the cast on IMDb and I said, yeah, those are Korean actors.
You know,
you've got it.
I may not have said those correctly, and I apologize if I didn't, and I apologize if I did anybody any harm. But I said, hey, I'm going to give it a try. Why not?
Well, it's like Japanese is the thing that I've been trying to learn like a little bit. And then we throw in a Korean movie and I'm just like, I got nothing. I don't know how any of their alphabet or like pronunciation or anything. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't got it.
But also like, I can't say enough. I'm not diverse enough to say what they were speaking was fully Korean. Like, I know a good few Korean words. Like, I can recognize them by ear, and I didn't hear, like, the ones that I knew. So...
Well, they said anyang.
I didn't hear it. I only heard, like, one anyang, and then that was it.
There was, like, a lot. I think whenever they said bye, there's a lot of goodbyes in this film. There was a good mix of language, though. You could tell there was that one scene where there was, like, a Chinese translator, and they threw in some Chinese there. And then I think there was a Vietnamese character, because at one point a character calls him Viet Cong as a derogatory. And then that character is then dubbed in English, given Korean hard-coded subtitles. And so that was interesting because he was dubbed and his mouth moved. And I was like, so is he speaking Vietnamese? Why didn't they just keep it as Vietnamese? So that was a choice. Yeah, I didn't fully understand in that one.
I was wondering, like, which audience was that for? Was that for, like, the Korean release, or was that for the American release? And if that was for the American release of this movie, why didn't they just do full American dubbing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against having the film in its own language with subtitles and all that stuff, but it was an interesting choice to have the one character that is like a known foreign person be dubbed in. It was just very strange. I was like, why do I suddenly understand this man?
That's happened a couple times in movies that we've watched where like the person will be dubbed in English and like I start hearing it and all of a sudden I'm like, wait, am I speaking Korean? Like, am I getting it?
Is this how it feels to know a different language? No, Aaron, actually, when you know a different language, as far as I know, you still just like understand it and it's its own thing.
Well, what's the point then?
We should all be learning English. Come on, guys.
No.
Yeah.
That is not what I'm saying, everybody.
Oh, okay. Well, I interpreted the exact words you said fully wrong. But yeah, we're talking about this movie, and I feel like there's a caveat to our podcast, to the description of the podcast, where we both singularly, individually tell people to watch or not watch it. It's like, Aaron, you say to watch or not watch it, and I tell it. It does sound like we come to a consensus every time. True. And we come to a consensus to tell people whether or not we should watch it or not watch it. But sometimes our opinions differ.
Sometimes we do come to a consensus, but it's usually just totally by chance.
Yes, I think our tastes differ enough where sometimes we'll watch a Shrek 2 and I'll be like, So we sat down, we watched this, and there were too many times where a movie I have not seen, 2003's Old Boy, rung true in my head, and I thought, are they doing an old boy here? He's got a hatchet, he's got a long hair, he's protecting a young girl. Is this an old boy? Are they doing an Old Boy 2010?
Yeah.
Should this movie be called Old Boy 2, The Older Boy? But no, it is not an old boy. It is this movie.
It's Man on Fire with Denzel Washington.
It is a touch of Man on Fire if Man on Fire had the worst pacing that I could think of in terms of establishing sort of a trust and rapport between characters. Whereas Man on Fire establishes this sort of like, it is quick and it feels so good. And this movie, we have an older man who obviously has military training and, is a trained killer and all this sort of stuff. And you have a young girl who enters the heart, just seeps into this man's life and changes him for the better? ?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know about this one.
Yeah, they're living together in their little apartment where he runs his pawn shop out of seemingly the front of his apartment. And
The false entrance to the pawn shop. That was a little interesting to me. I was like, what? They had to call him the pawn shop ghost a couple times for me to be like, oh, they're selling things to him.
Yeah, I 100%, if they had not clarified that he owned a pawn shop, would not have gotten by context that the thing he was doing was a pawn shop.
Was there a sign that I missed that like wasn't subtitled or something? Like
that might be it. Because
Straight
the
up.
first thing we see is like she's got her little MP3 player, which she gives to him, I think, as like a gift, because like they have some kind of thing where like she downloads music onto it for him and changes the music, and then he pays her for that. And so like that's
all Linkin Park.
Yeah, that's the first interaction we see with them, is her giving him the MP3 player back and then him paying for it. And so I'm like, oh, that's his business, is like having a fleet of children.
It wasn't a real transaction. There was no receipt. It was just like sort of friendly in nature. And then he like invites her over for lunch and stuff. It did not establish that he was just some like pawn shop guy, which is what they were trying to sell us.
Yeah. I don't know. And it seemed she knew that, the mom knew that, but then like he had no other customers. I don't know.
Also, there was an element of the movie where before this, there's this sort of like nightclub scene where a woman is seen like tasing this guy and stealing his drugs or whatever. And the entirety of that sequence, there's a confusing amount of plainclothes cops in it. And it gets confusing because I'll mention it right now. There's a silly cop in this movie. I call him Goofy Cop, Silly Cop. He's a funny guy. He's got a funny face and he eats chips and like overall is just like goofy during the movie. And he shows up and does his sort of thing where he, I don't know, gets beat up by a big mob guy or something. But because of his sort of vibe, I didn't understand if he was a cop or a gangster, like a goofy gangster or a goofy cop. And I was like, is there a bad guy?
So I think that was supposed to be like intentional. I think like the movie wanted you to question, who are these guys? Because
morality.
The first thing we see is like them sitting in the car together and they're talking about jumping someone. And so you're like, oh, okay. Like, they're going to be jumping someone.
Gangsters.
Yeah. And then it turns out they're cops and you're like, oh, they're cops. But like, and then weirdly enough, like it does all of that. And you're like, all right, well, it's setting up the cops and like it's setting up like the cop character to be the main character. But then it stops following them and then goes to the pawn shop ghost.
So pawn shop ghost and this is analysis happening in real time. Are they establishing a hierarchy of morality here where we have the gangsters and the drug dealers, the lowest of the low? We have the cops who are, doing their job, I guess, but it comes with like, they can only do as much as they can within the law, and we have this throughout the film this huge drug ring that they are just fully letting happen throughout Chinatown and beyond, and harvesting organs and all this sort of stuff is like tied back to this drug ring. And then you have the highest echelon of morality with this pawn shop ghost indicating that he is higher than cops, higher than gangsters, easy, no, bar none, no problem. He's a good guy. Higher than cops because he's above the law and he singularly cares about this girl, and out of the goodness out of his heart, you know, he'll water a cactus if he wants to. And there was a lot of that introduction of characters that I couldn't really understand, and I'm trying to piece it out now, right? Where I'm like, okay, so he's the best guy because he feeds a young, partially homeless girl at this point. Like, he's a good guy. You have to sort of just be like, he's a good guy.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I think that's that common trope that we see all the time of like, this guy used to do things that, you know, are kind of questionable, and now he's trying to live a better life, but then something brings him back in and he has to live a life of being a vigilante. When are we going to get the movie where, like, yes, he used to have a career where he killed people and he's really good at it, but now he's retired and he's trying to live right. Something happens, and then the rest of the movie is like him going to the police station and being like, I'd like to file a report, please. And they're like, oh, yes, please, right over here. He like files it, and then it goes through like all the proper channels. Paperwork gets filed, and they're like, oh, yep. Turns out somebody did hit your car. Then they tried framing you, but hey, they're connected to a gang, and we took them down last night. Good job, thank you. And then they like give him a commendation.
Wasn't that like the third quarter of the Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, where he keeps calling immigration services?
Yeah.
And he goes, I was a really good war guy, and I deserve to be heard for my guy who's over there.
Yeah. And then but there's absolutely no freaking out on the phone. There's no point where like the tension is actually high. He's just like, oh, yes, I'd like to check on the status of my report that I filed. Oh,
2-week wait?
It's still in process? Okay, yeah. I'll call back then. Thank you.
All the tension is gone, and the movie is literally like, it takes 4 weeks to watch the movie because he just sits in queue somewhere, and he's just like, well, at least I have the Sudoku to do today.
Yeah.
There is some narrative propulsion here to essentially the girl getting kidnapped, you know, the mother and her daughter getting kidnapped, and of course the mother had to involve herself in this sort of drug ring thing. And it's implied that not even implied, rather, she fully is a huge drug addict and takes many things, just is strung out the entire movie until she's no longer strung out or capable of doing anything. But yeah, it just felt really, I think there's a moment where I would have rather had the movie where his past is described early enough where I care about it, and like, or I'm rather more involved in seeing him do more badass stuff, like stunts, knife fights, gun fights, whatever. I want to know he's capable of doing that before any of it happens so that I can be prepared for it, because it being a surprise was not fun for me. It was like I just got to sort of find out about it with the cops, and so we're just sort of hanging out with the cops all the time when they're like, he escaped the police precinct because we uncuffed him for some reason. I don't know why we uncuffed him, but now he's out. Oh no, let's watch the security footage of him beating ass instead of
being there while he beats ass.
Yeah, getting to see that firsthand is more interesting and narratively propellant. I'm always just looking for something to like push it forward, and we always had to be on like the back seat until like the third quarter of the movie, which hurt.
Well, now see, I don't think that's too big of like a demand, right? Like when you look at other movies, let's go with Taken, John Wick, and Nobody. Classic movies where it's the guy who used to do something bad, now trying to be retired. Something happens which sends him back into the life. And all of those movies, I think, do a better job of covering the thing that person used to do and then showing why they're still a force to be reckoned with. And I mean, as we know with all movies, you gotta show, not tell. This movie did a lot of telling rather than showing. So I don't think it's too out of place to be like, hey, we just want more. You know, we want more to drive the narrative rather than just sit me down and be like, okay, well, we got his dossier here, and looks like he did this, he's capable of doing this and this. That might be important later, wink, wink. And you're like, no, it's not going to be important later.
Oh, the senators were disgusted by this this training regiment was it's so gross. They ate duty. I don't know. It was nasty. They made them barf. Yeah, it was. Yeah, the three movies you mentioned specifically are you follow that person singularly, so you're able to see them. You get the action scenes up front, and then it continues through that. So we have instead a very heavy second half to third quarter, fourth quarter. You know, like the movie I think takes a long time to be like, oh, we had an action film budget for 90 minutes, but we wanted to make a 2-hour feature. So we had to pad a lot of it with this story that we wanted to tell, but there wasn't enough propellant to be like, we'll get to the action, folks. Don't worry about it. And I'm not saying that I like followed the story. I just think it wasn't interesting enough to warrant the time.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that I need a movie to present me with 22 straight hours of action. Oh, you gotta be pounding me in the face with all these punches and these shoots and these blah, blah, blah. No, I don't need that, but I do need something to be happening. And, you know, it does beg the question, is the pacing here that we're seeing, is that their choice by like absolute choice, or did they just not have the budget to make the 2-hour movie that they ended up having to make?
I think that's confusing because just based on time, I feel like it'd be cheaper to make a shorter movie.
Right.
So I don't really care about the money or logistics of it or anything, but like less movie, you just put more, you know, you don't put more stuff in it. You have less stuff fully, but you can try to get to the point you're trying to make before you've lost the interest of the audience. And I agree, it doesn't have to be fast and furious, punch it, go, we stole a bank, I don't know, there's a vault behind, oh my god, you know, it doesn't have to be that. But for a movie that is presented as this action film, to try and be this moralistic true crime drama, it didn't blend the two well enough for me, where I'm like, I will watch a true crime drama. It can be 2.5 hours long. I'll watch it if you give me the stakes and, you know, all this sort of stuff that would be required of this type of thing. You can give me an action movie that has low points and high points and stuff like that. But if you're trying to blend the two into this action motivated true crime drug thriller, you have to establish two sides that are equally important. And I think the addition of the cops muddied the waters a little bit, because you are getting people who are learning about this guy's past through dossiers and stuff like that, whereas we, the audience, get a full flashback of him getting shot like 4 times, his wife getting fucking destroyed by a truck. And that's like the 15, you know, like less than 5 minutes of a scene where you need to be like, oh, this guy had it all. He had a wife, he had a baby on the way. It was all taken away from him. That's all I needed. And they gave that to us so far into the movie where I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Give that right in the beginning and then smash cut to him, long hair, disheveled, sad as fuck, and still show the baby shoes. And I'm balling. I'm right there. But the way it was displayed in this way, where you see the baby shoes and the wife grave in the beginning, I wasn't there yet, because I was like, you can't. I get that he has this, but I don't know why he has this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think doing it the other way would have caused more emotional, damage to us, the audience.
Well, it would have carried more weight
Yeah.
emotionally.
Yeah.
If we knew. We can't not know until 3/4 of the way through the movie. I just think it was an error on when that information was provided to us.
Yeah. I also think that I liked what they were trying to do with the true crime elements of this movie.
Yeah.
And even tying in the police, I thought was kind of interesting. Especially so near the beginning of the movie, the little girl who lives in his building gets kidnapped. That sets up the impetus for him trying to make things right. Then he's sent to go deliver some drugs to another crime lord. He gets there, he delivers the drugs, and then the crime lord's like, yo, what is this? Like, are you trying to set me up? And you're like, oh, okay, well, like, this is different. This is cool that, like, now he's sent to do a drug deal that wasn't actually set up. And then the cops are on their way. Oh, no, like, he's being set up. He's in the middle of this. And, I thought that was very good. It kind of looks like it's ramping up. Then the stakes end up just being kind of mid-tier, low level. Nothing really happens.
Again, the cops get involved. He gets to the precinct, and it fizzles to sort of like a nothing burger.
Yeah.
Because, yes, the elevation of... I think there was that really good shot of him getting like pushed off, or I don't even know what happened, but he ends up in the netting of the golf range, and he's like fucked up and beat up because, I don't know, it was like 5-on-1 basically. And the stakes are like there. You're feeling for him. He looks like he's trying to get away. The drug lord is like actively trying to get away. And then there's like a body in the trunk, and you're like, okay, a new element has been added here. And suddenly, like, I was thrown for a curveball because I was like, is it the girl? Like, who's out? They show it, it's the mom, and I'm like, oh, okay. They've added the organ harvesting to this drug element. And I think that's when it started to be a bit too much, where I was like, just do the drugs or do the organ harvesting. If you're doing both, it's two different people. But you're saying that the drug people are the organ harvesting people? I don't think so, guys.
Yeah. The movie used the body in the trunk of his car as a way for the police to investigate like him and like have a whole bunch of interest in him. And like, oh, who is this guy? And why does he have this body? But like, I feel like if he had been found in the middle of this sting operation when they show up to, do this drug bust, they still would have had a reason to investigate him, especially if he's like, I'm not going to talk.
Yeah, because it wasn't his car, right? I don't know how he got there.
I think that was his car. I think
how'd they get a body in his car?
Well, they like talked with him beforehand, and like I think that's when they gave him the drugs and probably put I don't know,
just planted it.
Yeah,
I guess it was a little confusing.
Yeah, so I'm with you where I think it was just a little bit too much all at once, and I was the whole organ stealing was very interesting in this movie. It would have been better if they had chosen one over the other.
Yeah.
Or at least just like put that in like later in the movie.
Or followed it to its actual logical, darker conclusion at the end of the film instead of the sort of cop out, everybody's fine, hearts, stars, and horseshoes.
Yeah.
I'll fill up your book bag, go live out on the streets. Yeah, like I don't know.
Because that's the other thing too, is like, the movie starts with like talking about drugs and how many people in Korea are like hooked on drugs and hooked on different kinds of drugs.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the movie, they're like, well, we didn't really do anything to solve the war on drugs. So that's still going on. And oh, the organ harvesting, that's still going on too. So things are kind of dark, man.
Yeah. The thing I think was, I think I needed a scene to establish the cops as competent, because them finding out about him means that they emailed Obama, which was like, very goofy. White House at whitehouse.gov. Very funny. Go email Obama. He won't answer that one anymore. I'll tell you that.
He might.
Maybe.
I think it's
maybe
still on his
Joe will forward
BlackBerry.
it. Maybe Joe will forward it. Yeah. Either way, this is the cops. That's the thing is when I think of the cops as like as an organization, as a character in this movie, I can only look to Goofy Cop. I know there's the other cop who is actually functioning and doing things in the thing, but for the most of the movie, Goofy Cop is front and center doing funny stuff. He like super kicks a guy in a wheelchair in an airport at one point.
Really good.
So it's like I only care about Goofy Cop because he's doing the most interesting stuff that I care about in this movie. So there is a scene where I want Goofy Cop not in the room at all, and the competent police people are doing like a drug bust, or like they did the thing in the beginning, but it didn't seem very fruitful because they were like, oh, it was already gone. They were close to doing something, so they're aware of this drug ring and sort of how it. I don't think they were aware of how it works at all. They were just like following gangsters, and they followed a bag to a drop, and then we're like, whoa, wing it. It'll be somewhere. So there's an element where all of their planning didn't seem high level. It felt like they were just really winging it. And so I never got like they were DEA multiple times. They're like, we are the drug guys. This is our task force. And they consistently were just like, wing it, send some guys over. Let's turn the light on in his apartment. And then Goofy Cop goes, whoa, the body on the floor.
Yeah.
Right? It was constantly Goofy Cop taking the sort of edge off of hardcore DEA police work. And so the only character that gets like to be the badass is the main guy, but I feel like they had this police force that's like, we're badass too.
Yeah, that was another thing where it was almost as if they wanted to set the police, DEA, whatever you want to call them, up as competent and cool and like the guys that are driving a lot of this story. But even from the beginning, the first thing we do is see them fail. And then each thing is just kind of like, they're just not really doing their job well.
Yeah. That plus the like slapstick Goofy Cop. It really was like, well, do you want them to be goofy or cool? Because you can't, you're not both.
Yeah. I will tell you though, that scene where the guy in the wheelchair, he's coming through the airport, he's like coming off of his terminal. You're like, okay, where is this going? You see the guy running at him, you're like, where is this going? And then you see him just do a flying fucking kick right into his chest, sending him backwards, falling out of his wheelchair. I was just like, oh my Lord.
It was such an amazing scene. Like literally, what was that scene?
Yeah.
I don't think there was even build up to it besides maybe being like, hey, go get that drop at the airport. There's a guy coming in. I don't even know if they did that.
I don't think
They're
they
just like,
did.
Hey, Goofy Cop, go to the airport.
Yeah, it was just like showing them like on their day-to-day business so that they could like have somebody call them and then talk to them. And so like that's just the introduction we got to what they do day to day, kicking people in the chest.
Did we miss a full TV show of these guys like The Wire style taking out this drug ring? Because there was not enough established to give them any agency to be doing.
Maybe there's a whole prequel movie that we don't know about, like The Men from Somewhere, and it's all about them.
The Somewhere Men.
Yeah.
They're a real somewhere. Yeah. Real bad balancing act here of
Speaking of
the entire
being
character.
somewhere, should we be somewhere where there's ads?
Let's go to the ad space. Boop, beep, boop, beep, beep, boop, boop, beep, beep.
What year is this?
The ad year is over.
Oh, thank goodness. I guess it's back to the podcast. Well, so what else? What else was in this movie? What else did you like? What worked for you?
what worked, I think a lot of the cinematography actually worked for me. There was a good style to it that I enjoyed. A lot of the, I don't want to say Old Boy, because again, I haven't seen Old Boy, but I think they were just like intense colors. I feel like John Wick did the same thing, right? You get like, you go into a club, it's very like blue, dark. You get the lights from the lasers and the thumping and the dancing and whatever. This movie did the same exact thing, where there's a lot of striking shots that are single light, and maybe that's a product of the the era, of the budget, of all this sort of thing. But it does work. There is a good element to a lot of this film looking really good. There was that amazing like pink sunrise, sunset type of shot that was just like a huge landscape shot. Beautiful. And to have a moment in this movie that is just like a little serene thing felt jarring, because I was like, what did we do to deserve this shot? This is a great shot, everybody. And then they're like, well, we're back in the parking garage. And you're like, no. But yeah, it was fun to look at. And for all the like actual stunts and blood and squibby sort of ness to it, I think it all sort of worked together, where you have a very like flat color shot. You have an effect, somebody getting shot or stabbed, or, something bad happening, blood coming out of them in some way. It didn't look too bad. There were some dated effects there, but for the most part, a lot of the hits and squelchiness of this was very effective for me.
See, I will say, when I think of the cinematography, I think of the cinematography of the fights. And I think for a lot of them, they just didn't work for me. So, one, there were several times where like a stunt happened and then they just absolutely didn't show it. Was just like, come on, guys. Like, the one guy rushes him in his apartment, and then we are on the outside and see a window break, and then it cuts back to a broken window and the guy on the floor, and it was just like, who the fuck was that for? The people in the room? I should have been in that room. But
the better stunt is just he fucking falls out the goddamn window.
Yeah. And then, there were other times where they would do an action shot and the camera would follow the action, like it would rotate with whichever way the person's being flipped or thrown to the ground.
Yeah.
Which that always works for me. I love that. It naturally moves our eyes where it should be. Loved that. And they were always like short. But what didn't work with me was like the cohesiveness of it. So like it would throw somebody onto a table and the action would follow that. And then like the person would get up and rush them and it would follow that person. But it didn't show like the person getting off of the table. It was just like person flip onto table, person's off table, rushing that person. And it just felt very like, all right, we got this one stunt. Now we got this stunt. And now we got this stunt. They're all three.
A lot of impacts.
Yeah. And like you can like piece together in your head what happened to get from point A to point B to point C. But I want to see all of point A, point B, point C. I don't need a one cut to do it, but I do want to see ABC.
Yes. I think there's an element in this film trying to show the brutal nature of this drug ring, of organ harvesting, all this sort of stuff that they were trying to inject into this film. But when there's no brutality to the fights, because they're all like quick cut, they're not clean, don't get me wrong, but the action does look clean, because it's like he's on the ground, he's down, next guy, where I think there's a shot in there that adds a layer where somebody, they go through the plate glass table, and then there's a shot of them with the sound effect of their hand pushing on the glass, and you hear it and they're getting up, and like that adds an element of physicality and pain and like reality that this movie did not have. I think it was an element of reality that was missing, where you're like, he's a superhuman gun kata, knife kata guy, and he'll do all this stuff really, really fast, but he gets some cuts on him, but you don't really know where the cuts came from. You're not going to see them. They're not important. It's important that he kills the guys.
Yeah, and then there were a couple other big fights where it was like, it felt like it wanted to be more conjoined, but just kept being separate. And I don't know.
I think it's an element of sort of super soldier, like larger than life. This guy, he can't lose. So he just terminates, he Terminator walks through the whole movie like John Connor. He gets little cuts on his head and he's like, don't care. I'm gonna kill, robotic not performance. I think he was a good actor, but his character ends up being this robot killing machine.
Yeah. Which was interesting because, like, when they do John Wick, like, they throw him through just a fucking ringer, man. But, like, the thing is, like, John Wick always gets back up.
But he'll, limp.
Yeah. But, like, even that, you're like, all right, I know, like, a normal person couldn't go through, 4 movies of this, but, like,
right.
Thank God this man can. But, that shows the super... Bless you, John Wick. It shows the superhumanness of it. And I almost just didn't feel that with this person, where it was like he felt too human, and like they wanted to do some like cool, like absolute John Wick. Like, I know this movie's years before John Wick, but it felt like they wanted to do some John Wick shit, but just didn't let themselves. Like, I think about The Raid, right?
Yeah.
The Raid, where everybody fucking knows Kung Fu in that, like every single fucking person. And in this movie, it was just like, he knows Kung Fu. Nobody else really does. He'll, like, kind of beat somebody up, but, like, nobody's really there to fight him.
The Vietnamese guy, kinda?
Yeah, he got his match kind of near the end, but, like, I wanted just, like, absolute people being thrown at this guy to try and whoop his ass, and him just be like, no, I'm the actual king of whoop ass.
Yeah. 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 I don't know what to compare it to in that 2010 era, but I think The Raid was a similar...
Yeah. And so, like, The Raid feels kind of fantastical in a way where it's like, okay, everybody knows Kung Fu, but it works and it's cool as hell. And, like, I wanted that from this movie. I wanted that level of superhero-ness.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's another thing about balance, where he can't be the only guy that's doing this and at the same time be this superhuman / too human, like they were trying to balance him into this enigma, paradoxical type of guy that was unbelievable.
Yeah. The other thing too was, like, with that, he was like following this thread of like, where did the girl go and where is she now? And I'm doing the True Detective thing, and it's kind of cool. And I liked that, and it makes sense with like his military, like, special ops and like information, like background. I like that, but again, they didn't do enough of like the fantasticalness of it, where like he's the only one that can solve this. That's what it should have been. He's the only one who can figure out where she went because he's got the skills to do it. He knows how to hack a phone. He knows how to do this. He can
fucking Ethan Hunt, Mission Impossible, bud.
Yeah, James Reese.
That's what I'm saying.
Like. Yeah.
The perfect comparison here is Ethan Hunt, like his super spy, excellent skills, all this sort of stuff. But and I've seen this multiple times, people have pointed this out to me, and I'm like, that is genius for Ethan Hunt. It's Tom Cruise, whatever you have to say on Tom Cruise, whatever. Mission Impossible is a written movie. He's doing the lines, all this sort of stuff. Ethan Hunt as a character does weird shit that he does like sleight of hand, and he does sort of goofy stuff, and he's hacking, and he looks through he goes to max.com, like all this sort of stuff, and he is not only displayed in the movie as this badass super spy, extremely agile and kick butt, all this sort of stuff, he also is given the emotional range to be extremely smart, think ahead, plan, act, all this sort of stuff. Whereas this character has you see him walk, again, it's like Terminator,
yeah.
Walking somewhere. He walks up to the building where the drug making is happening, and I had no idea how he knew that was there. I guess he followed the trail because he was, following the kids, but it didn't seem very intensive to get him to that point. It was just like he followed 2 steps. He followed one kid who brought the drugs, got the credit cards, got the money from the ATM, and then he found where the drugs were being made.
Okay, so with that, right, he's on the street and he like goes by that one like gashapon little machine that says that it's out of order, and he like pieces together. He's like, I know that is how they're doing the drugs. Some little kid's gonna come up and put a coin in there, and it's like, bro, how the fuck did you like? How did you connect that? How did you connect this one machine?
One tiny 5-second thing. I don't know if you
was
missed
it that he saw the fire truck in there that was the same fire truck that he got on his package.
2 things. There is
Okay.
that exactly. He had the package with the fire truck. The thing before, he grabbed a bag before he goes to the meat from a locker that has some sort of sign. I don't know if it said out of order or whatever. But before he goes to the meat to like give the drugs to that guy and find out at the golf thing, he goes to that locker and pulls a sign off a locker and does the thing. So there's 2 pieces of evidence in my mind where he knows that they use things that look out of order to hide things in plain sight, and then he also knows that he had the fire truck gachapon caged game thing. So it wasn't a full leap for me, but I was kind of like, okay, that was a long time ago, guys.
Okay, but see, and you know what? I like that because that is a good hidden detail that when you think about it later, works really well.
Mm-hmm.
But if they had just highlighted that a little bit more and been like, see, he's the one who notices these little details, and he's the one who can figure this out. Yeah,
he didn't do a thing in the movie that made me appreciate his like higher intellect or training besides the kick-assery. But I think going into this, you need the Ethan Hunt level of planning and heisting and, one step aheadedness that he did not display as far as I could tell.
Yeah.
Except that cool bomb exploding with the gas, that was some think-headedness.
Yeah. And see, again, like that's the kind of stuff you would think that he would have learned in his time in like the special ops world that I would have liked to have seen more of. What? Because
he displays it though 2 times.
One.
Yeah, that's the thing, is the only thing that they tried to focus on was that he can do the guns and he beats the people and he shoots the people.
Yeah.
Where the more interesting side of him being this man from nowhere is the reason he is such this high value, ghosted asset is because
a Baba Yaga, if you will.
Exactly. He is this, pawn shop ghost because he is a multi-hyphenate. He has all these sort of skills that you get to learn throughout the movie instead of just kick ass.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, what do you think? Would you recommend this to people?
Oh, Aaron. Oh, silly, naive Aaron. This film, unfortunately, does not hit enough of the mark for me to want people to watch it. I think Goofy Cop, give me a Goofy Cop movie. I'll watch that. This one I'm going to say is a not watch for me. It doesn't hit my low bar. No, I'm just kidding. I think I do have pretty high standards for wanting people to watch movies, but this one, I said it at some point while we were watching. I said, there's a 90-minute version of this movie that is quick, to the point. Just get some Brian De Palma sort of directing and editing in there, and I think you got
Fincher.
I think you got a good film on your hands. Yeah, Fincher.
Dude, Fincher would get so like greasy and nasty with this
That's
movie.
the thing. I think there is an element of this of Seven here, and it's not as gross, it's not as glurchy and gloopy, but yeah, there is an element where the true crime-ness of it all comes down to a bad balance. And so I can't recommend it. I do not think you should watch this film. But Aaron, what do you think?
I'm right there with you. I also think that this is a not watch. And it wasn't so much like the pacing for me, because in the end, like, it felt a little long, but it worked. And I liked the story they were trying to tell in the like true crime aspect, not the whole him being a secret badass. I liked that they were like, hey, there's these nasty crime syndicates that happen in dark places, and there's unfortunate people who get victimized by it. Loved that. But what didn't work was the whole action and just the lack of wanting or allowing itself to be more. It could have been so much more. And they could have thrown a whole bunch of kung fu people at him and he done cooler kung fu, and they could have had him be a cool, smart guy who does smart things, but they just didn't want to let him do his thing. And ultimately that with the at times jarring cinematography didn't work for me.
All right. Well, consensus mode.
Consensus.
It is funny that you do mention the sort of true crime pretty much working for you, and I do agree. And as far as pacing, I agree as well. It's not that it was paced too poorly. I just think that there was, again, too much emphasis on one thing to draw out the hour 50, whatever it was. I do think there is also, like, again, like the Fincher cut of this is it gets like really dark. What's in the box style, like straight up the gangsters do take the eyes off of this young girl, and there's no reason for them not to. They're ruthless gangsters. And this guy is left with the choice of just like, he's burned it all down, but what is it all worth, And the movie asks that question for 2 seconds, and then they're like, here she is.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say I will try not to spoil too much about this movie for some reason. I know that usually when we don't recommend movies, we just absolutely spoil the hell out of them. But what I'll say, what I'll say is that yes, the ending tries to do something very, I will say, interesting. And I was like, oh shit, like if this commits to this, I'm actually kind of
seriously.
Yeah. And it wanted to commit. It wanted to commit so bad. It had the ring in its hand and it was getting down on its knee. But then it just said, "Oh no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm a little bit too scared to do this because it's gonna
fucking
committee
ship."
Yeah, it was. And it just said, "Hey, I can't do this. I'm sorry. This is too dark."
There is a dark turn to this movie that I think if they followed through I would have possibly been like, it's flipped,
Yeah.
I get it. But for it to just fully cop out on its own thing and be like, you can be my daughter in spirit. Goodbye.
Because
didn't work.
Because what went with that was that, like, and this is a huge thing for me in movies, that when movies do it, it just absolutely destroys a movie, is when a movie sets up a character to work a certain way and then the character doesn't do that thing in the end. Like when the character goes away from its motivation, D&D-esque. If you're working out of alignment, fuck you, you're getting penalized. Like the same thing for movies. If you've set up your character's alignment and you've set them up as true evil or chaotic evil, just commit. If the bad guy's saying, I did this, and I'm a bad guy.
Then he did it.
Then he did it, and there's no reason not to. And especially when it's a real life organization like a mafia or a triad or whatever.
Dyad.
Not the Yakuza. They're cool in my book. Love you, Yak guys. You guys are so cool.
I see your back tattoo. I don't know why you're showing it to me, but
don't look at my hand. So, when you got one of them, commit to their evilness. Make them evil, and then don't have them just be like, "Oh yeah, no, we didn't do it. We were doing a gambit."
The other thing with this is this film, I think, did it a lot, and I can't point to any more than one specific example, but it did have like we have to show you this so that you know what we're doing here. And so they show you the two eyeballs, and you as the audience rightfully think they're the girls because they showed you like footage of her possibly being gassed and like being under the knife, all this sort of stuff. And then after this big fight, I don't know, it feels like 15 minutes later, they take the tarp off this guy and he's like, his eyes are gone. And that's like, that's the scene.
Yeah.
That's the scene that explains, oh, that's where the eyes were from. I'm like, yeah, no shit. I saw the girl. She didn't. She still had her fucking eyes. I know they're not hers.
Yeah. No, it was.
Why the I didn't need to know. They're not hers. She had her 2 eyeballs. I saw them in her head.
Yeah, them explaining was almost like the cherry on top for just how fucking insulting this
Dude,
was.
a fucking goofy cop like looks at the camera like,
Yeah. And the movie,
no way.
Like, takes a second, goes sepia tone, and they're like, so you see what actually happened was that we didn't do that.
Fucking like some American guy walks out in front of the movie and is like, so, hello, I'm the guy from Twilight Zone. So
The thing about expectation subversion is, and you're like, no.
yeah, so I think there were other times where that happened in the movie. I can't point to any of them specifically, but I think there was an element that instead of where I think we praised it in Hocus Pocus, right? Where you're like, it's a kid's movie, you're told a thing and then the characters go do it. This one, I think there was times where you're told a thing and then for no reason you're shown a different thing that's related and then something happens. But it's like, I didn't need the intermediary step. You just do the thing. Just propel the movie forward.
Yes. Because not only did they say, like, he broke out of jail, he got away from us, then they showed the footage.
Yes. And I'm like, I get it. You already didn't show it to me. Don't show it to me through the CCTV. I don't care anymore. I already know he's out.
Yeah. Broski, just give me the footage. You took the time to film this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're like, well, we shot it from the ceiling, so sorry.
Yeah. I don't
So, yeah. That's where it starts. I really start to get a little irate about the movie where I go, ooh, why do they do? But it's right at the end too, so it's so fresh. And I'm like, they had to have done other shit.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the CCTV thing is a good example, but I'm like, there's gotta be more in that chestnut. Oh boy.
You know, I would love to give a honorable mention to the male Karen in this movie.
Yes.
Where
amazing.
Like, I think they were trying to make him a goofy character. It just by the way he dressed, I was loving this guy.
Oh, 100%. He has a full line that's like, my Dolce & Gabbana shirt. I just bought this. Yeah. He's fully the like too rich because of drugs and like, but still what doesn't make sense about him, that character, is he's established as this guy who's not doing the grunt work because he's in a hot tub with like 4 ladies and then he like drives cars. He's got the Dolce & Gabbana and he doesn't want to get his hands dirty, which is established because the other guy who is established as like pure evil kills a guy with a hatchet, is doing all this stuff, going to the meets, all this kind of stuff. So why the fuck is the guy who doesn't do any work on the ground floor making the drugs with the children?
He does this, like, I couldn't tell what his role in the organization was. I know he was the brother of the guy who appeared to be at the top.
They're brothers.
But I couldn't tell if that meant that he's also like co-kingpin, because he did a suspicious amount. And like even the brother, the guy who's supposedly the kingpin, like did a stupid amount of just like groundwork and like being there on the ground and like watching stuff like, huh.
Well, yeah,
I did put a body in there.
The kingpin guy gets like we're introduced to him as his head is getting smashed in by the golfing guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, this guy's, I guess the moment where you're supposed to be like, oh, this guy is badass and cool is he was holding in the blood in his mouth to not show weakness. But I still think he's literally getting the shit kicked out of him by this guy with the gloves who's fucking punching his face. So I'm like, he's clearly lower than that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I up until that point, I had thought the guy that was kicking his ass was the kingpin of the whole
I
organization.
think he was, and they were doing a
and
sort
then
of
they took
coup.
over.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It
Still.
didn't establish it well enough that what he just sort of was a guy. He was very important and he wanted to do the drug deals, but it didn't work.
Yeah. But the male Karen was great. He wore this amazing leather jacket that like had the collar popped up with his cute red turtleneck.
He fit right in with the hot Italians.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. And then he had straight up the classic Karen haircut, only like full black.
Amazing.
And if the phrase "I want to speak to your manager" had come out of his mouth, I would have not been.
Oh my God. If they had gone to like a strip mall or something and he's just like, "Let me speak to your manager."
Yeah. That, and I think the other thing too that absolutely would not have shocked me is if, like we said at the end credits, if the song had been Linkin Park, "What I've Done," I would have been like, "Yep, saw it coming."
If only we knew when that song came out and if it would be a time fallacy where it's like, was that pre 2010? Probably.
Well, it was in Transformers,
which was 2007.
Yeah.
Okay. So there it is.
So we're set. Yeah.
We're set. Oh boy. As a shout out to Michael Bay.
Oh, we got him on the. Oh, no. That's right. Scheduling conflict this week.
Okay.
He said he couldn't be here.
Perfect. Okay, well, that is it. We're done talking about the man from nowhere. Did we learn where he was from?
No.
Turned out to be Korea, actually. Sort of a diss to all of Korea, I guess, in the movie. I didn't do it. It's in the movie. Either way, that's the movie, The Man from Nowhere, 2010. Aaron and I watched it, so you don't have to. Hopefully, if you made it through this episode and you still go and watch it, that's against our wishes, is what I'm saying.
But if you watch it and you feel like it is a movie that people should watch, or you feel like we're wrong, one, that's good because that's your opinion. Everybody's allowed to have opinions. And if you feel either the same or different as us, put it in a comment. Let us know. Say like, "Hey man, I thought this movie was the best thing I've ever seen. It made John Wick look like shit.
John Wick can suck my dick.
This movie's 10 times better than John Wick."
This movie's at least 10 times funnier. Does John Wick have a funny cop? I don't know.
I don't know.
But that's going to do it for this episode of Too Much Popcorn. I am engorged of popcorn. I won't ever say that phrase again, but thank you so much for listening. Leave a review on wherever you're listening or a comment, just like Aaron said. Comment whatever you want, you know? If it's relevant, that's a bonus for us. But again, we are pushing for those Spotify sort of follows, ratings, all that sort of stuff as we try to enter the ad zone, the ad space. But until then, thank you so much for listening and have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.